Welcome, folks, to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Every week, diving deep into the truth of Catholic social teaching and restoring all things in Christ.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
And I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
And we are coming to you from these United States of America here in the smack dab middle of the country, Des Moines, Iowa, for Iowa Catholic Radio. This is The Uncommon Good, and we are so happy to be with you. I'll just say who I am first. That's pretty good when you do that as a radio show host. Bo Bonner, who Senior Advisor for Mission Initiatives, and the Director for the Center for Human Flourishing at Mercy College. Bud, what do you do at the old college yourself?
I'm the Associate Provost at Mercy College of Health Sciences, and this morning when we started the show, my thought is, like, when we do the show, we try to bring energy into the studio. And this morning I was thinking, how do you do that with, like, the proper penitential disposition? And I want to be honest on air, I'm not great at penance and reparation and those sorts of things. But Ash Wednesday it can cause this, like, I don't know if you'd say cognitive dissonance, but, like, I'll laugh at a joke and be like, oh, it's Ash Wednesday. I don't know if that's how you really should think about it. But that's what, when we started the show, it's like, I'm Bud Marr.
We go full on NPR.
I'm hungry.
Well, that's better than I thought you were going to say, that we come in with a lot of energy and then Jimmy sucks it out. And I was like, that's not true, Bud.
Not at all.
He's shaking his head now. No, I think Jimmy's, I think his middle name is Jimmy the Energy Olsen.
Ooh.
Yeah, I like that.
James the Energy Olsen.
Yeah, that's right. So, no, I do understand what you're saying about, so, like, you know how if you are tired enough, like, you get giddy? Maybe that's what it is, right? So, like, it's the energy of burning away some of that, like, deep stores of carbs is what's, helping power along on Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't think I've reached that stage yet, hopefully by mid-afternoon. But it's interesting to talk to people who actually, like, had the spiritual discipline of fasting. They're like, yeah, after, like, 3 days, you get this, like, clarity of mind. And I was like, I'd love to. It's like Michael Scott. I'd love to be a part of that sometime.
Yeah, someday. Yeah, no, the mental clarity that might come, I'm like, well, what was the mental unclarity like the day before that? Well, speaking of something that's actually very clear, Bud, we are underwritten by Mercy College of Health Sciences, of course, where we both work, but that we both pour out a lot of love and devotion to our students. So mchs.edu if you're interested in becoming one of ours. The myriad programs that we have, the variety of being able to be a part of the medical community through learning with us, serving with us, and then also the clinical experiences that make you ready to join the healthcare field. mchs.edu. Thank you, Mercy College, for underwriting the show.
Yeah, this week kind of reminded me in a couple ways of, like, the great thing about having Mercy College of Health Sciences in Des Moines. On Monday, you brought in Kristen Collier, who is a teaching physician at the University of Michigan. We were talking about all sorts of things, like how to form students in light of, sort of like the unique challenges of education today. Yesterday, you and I were out at Simpson College, where they were announcing this 3+1 program where you can get a bachelor's degree from Simpson and then a nursing degree from Mercy College in 4 years. And so just a lot of cool things going on. And like you said, mchs.edu.
It's not really fair that you and I get to be, like, all a part of this. We're, like, rolling around talking to people, and they're always all like, well, who are these nice people that followed you in? And they're like, they're employed here. So, I'm thankful to all of Mercy College for, when people go, are these your employees, not flinching. They say yes. Bo and Bud are both employed. Speaking of good leadership, we're going to keep up our series on leadership, and today we're going to talk about holiness and sacrifice, and precisely what that has to do, of course, with leadership. But holiness, another thing where I think we have a variety of ways that we talk about it, and there's ways in which we sort of can, very timely, I think, for Ash Wednesday and Lent too, that we can sort of truncate it, make it something smaller than it is. So we're going to start with a very wide angle. Maybe people think we're not even talking about holiness at all by talking about the political situation on the ground during Jesus' time. But we'll get to holiness and how that informs sacrificial leadership, and then get to talk about that more when we continue this series next week as well. This is The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Stick around. We'll be back right after this.
Mondays at 9 a.m., Man Up with Joe Stopulos on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and on demand on the Iowa Catholic Radio app, connecting listeners with Christ.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences, where you can chart your course for more.
They provide unparalleled clinical rotations, hands-on learning, accelerated education, and flexible schedules, all part of the Mercy College experience.
Learn more at mchs.edu.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Confluence Brewing Company, brewed locally since 2012 and featuring regular, seasonal, and limited release beers. Confluence Brewing Company, 1235 Thomas Beck Road off the bike trail south of Grays Lake. ConfluenceBrewing.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Skeffington's Formal Wear, in business since 1951, with locations in Des Moines, West Des Moines, Coralville, and Ankeny. Skeffington's Formal Wear, fitting you for life celebrations. Online at skeffingtons.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Golden Rule Heating and Cooling. Since 1999, Golden Rule Heating and Cooling has been supporting customers with their rules to live by: respect, understanding, loyalty, expertise, and service. GoldenRulePHC.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Dental Associates, addressing your smile needs and dreams. 515-225-6742. Des Moines-DentalAssociates.com. Thank you, Dental Associates, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Back with the Uncommon Good, Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr joining you this Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the show. We're continuing our series on leadership, the common good, the Catholic difference this all makes, and how this all centers on the concept of sacrifice. Not to review everything, Bud, but, talking about that we get this idea from Philippians chapter 2, Jesus Christ self-emptying himself, kenosis, right? Pouring himself out for others, and how that needs to look when leadership hits the ground. Like, what are the details of how this looks like? So we've talked about things like making sure to make people not fragile, but anti-fragile, skin in the game, the willingness to put ourselves under the risks we expect of others, but also maybe even something more than that. And I think we're going to start that today by talking about holiness. Now, it's important to point out that holiness, before it means anything else, means to be set apart. So when we talk about holy objects or sacred ones versus profane ones, it's nothing about like that they're a higher class necessarily, or that they're magical or something like this. But if you even think of the Old Testament when they're talking about the accoutrements, or however you say it, for the altar, everybody had to have candlesticks, like back then. That's how you would see at night. But the ones for the altar were set apart. They were made holy. They had a specific purpose, and that purpose was for God. We sometimes act like holiness is one of two things, Bud, and this very much has to do with how we deal with leaders. We either act like, again, to be holy is some sort of personal trait. So there's holy people that it's just very natural for them to be talking about God or thinking in good ways, and the rest of us are just heathens schlepping along. Or it gets into this idea of being set apart it's some sort of stats or something like this. Like they're exceptional people, and everyone else is norm, but they're the sort of Michael Jordans of just living human life, and so they should get to be leaders. But this idea that to be set apart for a particular purpose, very germane to what we want to say about leadership, because leadership is not mostly the privileges that one gets by being a leader. In fact, being set apart can actually be some of the maybe the more painful or even lonely aspects of people being asked to be leaders.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned that idea of holiness, I even think about the some of the laws in the Old Testament, and some of these laws seem kind of arbitrary, like what you can eat or not eat, and not weaving certain sort of cloths together and things like that. And there are different ways that biblical scholars have tried to make sense of that. One approach is actually shellfish is bad for you. So in some ways there's this natural health element to the laws. But as you were indicating, it really was to set the people apart. And, I think you're right. The idea of holiness is it's not like we have a little meter that you can check and say well, this guy is an exceptional person, and he his moral behavior is exemplary. Because I think those of us now, we could talk about saints who were set apart in a special way and lived an exemplary life of Our Lady above all else. But I think the holy people that are leaders and things, part and parcel of it is that they recognize their own sinfulness, their own fallibility. Mm-hmm. And so you think of someone like David, there are many things that we could take away from his life. But one of the integral ones is he was a man after God's own heart, not simply because he never made any mistakes. He made some huge ones, But as we read about, like in Psalm, I believe it's 50, it's in that area, when he had sinned greatly, he said, create in me a clean heart, O God, and, give me this kind of contriteness, let not your Holy Spirit depart from me. And that's the kind of spirit that we have to bring to our family life, to organizational leadership on down the line.
Yeah, so when we set people apart to be leaders, it is not sort of a crowning of their achievement. It's not to say that they alone are good at this, or that like they're now special and everybody deal with them in this way. It's to say there's some purposes that have to have a special attention set apart for them. So there's holiness qua holiness, like the holiness of God, who is set apart above all things, but also, of course, more interior to all things than everything else. But then we set things apart for special purposes on down the line. So, of course, I'm not acting like every manager is holy. I mean, it would be weird to talk about, like, the holiness of the manager, maybe at, like, a restaurant or something like this. But on the other hand, I don't want to, like, partition this off too much, Bud. Like, the reason that people should exist as leaders is because they're set apart for a special purpose. And if you think they're setting apart is because they're special or that they deserve something that other people don't, you've completely missed the boat. What we want to say is that we exempt, quote unquote, we set apart some people from like the day-to-day tasks, not because the day-to-day tasks are less important. In fact, they're usually the most important part. But we set aside some people so that they have like the whole view or more of the view, and that they can think about things like the future and see like how all the parts connect. So even the idea of holiness set apartness should be an analogy at least about what any leader would look like. But this is when we talk about even like parenting being a holy obligation, is you're set apart within the family to think about the wholeness of all of it, right? So, every kid, every member of a family, every member of an organization rightfully thinks about what's sort of like in their grill, as it were. But it's really important for someone to be set apart to see the whole picture. So even by analogy, leadership is a holy endeavor because you have to be set apart for a purpose that's not about you. It's about the purpose by which you've been asked to be set apart for.
Yeah, and when we talk about these topics on the show, a lot of times we return to the Gospels, and I'm sure some listeners, when they first hear that, they think like, well, isn't your show about the common good? In what ways does the Gospel point us in that direction? Because we can approach Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John with this perspective that they sort of give us a spirituality, so it's about like the spiritual things. But if you really dig deep into the details of the Gospel, a lot of what's being talked about is how do you live faithfully as a people in a society that's largely turned away from God. And we're a kingdom of priests. Like the kind of language that St. Peter uses about the church, it's really like, what does it mean to be set apart for the work of God in a world that's burdened by sin? And part of this is just learning how to see rightly, and that is only achieved, I think, both through argument in the good sense of the term. So when you see Jesus interacting with different individuals and different groups in the New Testament, it really is this kind of like discourse, like Christ is walking his own followers through the law and saying, this is how you can live out the law in this time under the Roman Empire and be holy and set apart for the work of God.
Absolutely. So in the first century, we have the land of Palestine, with Israel. The sort of expanded thing here on the coast. That's this important tract of land for very material reasons. It's the road connecting a lot of the sort of trade of the ancient world. So it's no wonder that so many kingdoms have tried to get it. So at this point, Rome is occupying the Holy Land promised by God to his people. The Holy Land, right? The land set apart for them. And so this really actually sort of makes people ask the question, what is the land set apart for, and what should we do about the fact that it's occupied by a foreign pagan power? And so there's plenty of sort of political groups, but the four main ones that I think most people know of, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots. And we don't have to like get into like the complete history of these things, but just relatively, but like, real quick, what are the four ways these people are imagining what it means to live on a holy land, or how you get back to it because it's occupied?
Well, a central part of these discussions is the temple, because Palestine is occupied by Rome, but the second temple still exists. And so for the Sadducees, who are really the leaders in the temple and the ones who organize the temple sacrifices, their idea is like, well, we've got the temple, that's enough, so just don't rock the boat. They're sort of like old school conservatives, like just keep this order as long as it can exist, as long as we have access to temple worship.
And they have a good point, right? Because, like, look, when the boat gets rocked, the temple is destroyed by Rome. So the Sadducees aren't just, like, bad, like, villains, right?
Exactly.
They have a legitimate worry. Okay, so the Pharisees.
I mean, the Pharisees, they're also religious leaders, but mostly in the synagogues that are dotted throughout the landscape. So their leadership, their worship, so to speak, is more centered on Torah and really like reading Torah, reciting Torah, and living. They're about righteousness. In fact, our Lord says like the righteousness of his own followers has to exceed that of the Pharisees. So in a way, he kind of sideways praises the Pharisees, but he recognizes that there's something like a key piece that they're missing. With all of these groups, what Jesus says is not per se like an outright rejection. It's understand the truth that they have, and then here's like the fulfillment of it in what I'm inaugurating.
Yeah, so the Pharisees get this idea about like concern for righteousness, but they have this sort of exclusionary aspect to it, that they think that to be set apart, that the emphasis is on the apartness, as it were, driving people away. Okay, so maybe these other two people don't know as well. The Essenes, right? So they're sort of like proto-monks, right? Like sort of apocalyptic group that goes to the desert.
They're about set apartness as well, but it's really kind of, I mean, this is painting with broad strokes, but a withdrawal from society. Like you said, they moved to the wilderness. They're about like ritual cleansing and purification, and they're like, we're going to just draw ourselves out of this fallen order. Even they think temple worship has been compromised, and wait for the return of the Son of Man and the great day of the Lord, which will set things right. Then finally, I know we're moving really quickly, the Zealots, really like ancient political revolutionaries who thought because Rome was acting so unjustly towards God's people that any means really, including violence, could be used to overthrow that order.
So these are the four political groups that we want to point out that Jesus chose among his 12 disciples, members of all these groups. We're coming up to the break, but when we get back, it's important to realize that those sort of, just these four as representatives of attitudes towards like difficulties that need to be overcome, show leadership styles. They really do. And so, like, what does Jesus praise about them, but what is he pointing beyond? And so when we get back from the break, we'll try to make the rubber hit the road a bit about how these four groups are indicative of leadership temptations, how Jesus gets part of them, excludes part of that, like the husk of some, and then we'll point to this next idea about like what it truly means to be a sacrificial leader like Jesus Christ. This is The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Stick around. We'll be back right after this.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by CTO. Your support has helped thousands of students attend our Catholic schools. CTOIowa.org. At CTO, the bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Catholic Charities, where exceptional service is a hallmark in caring for those with essential needs, including food pantry, professional counseling, emergency family shelter, and refugee services. CatholicCharitiesDM.org.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Marr Security, a Catholic-owned family business providing security solutions for homes and businesses since 1953. PerMarrsecurity.com, 515-244-5660.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Five Sons Naturescapes. Five Sons Naturescapes is a Catholic veteran-owned family company providing premium outdoor landscaping. Learn more about Five Sons Naturescapes at FiveSonsNaturescapes.com. FiveSonsNaturescapes.com. Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Construction Professionals. Construction Professionals does remodeling and new construction. Construction Professionals is a Catholic family business built on a strong foundation. CPCustomHomes.com. Thank you, Construction Professionals, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio.
Thank you, Caldwell Parish, for underwriting Iowa Catholic Radio. Conform to the wishes of the deceased and to Catholic liturgical burial traditions. Caldwell Parish Funeral Home, Des Moines' only Catholic-owned and operated funeral home. CaldwellParish.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Ashworth Vision Clinic. Complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. 515-440-4610. AshworthVision.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Dr. David Ball from Des Moines Eye Surgeons, your total eye care specialist specializing in cataracts and glaucoma care. Des Moines Eye Surgeons, 515-255-3546, DMEyesurgeons.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry. Sarah is an apostolate dedicated to the support of new and existing vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org.
Back with the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr joining you this Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the show. So to wrap up today's episode, Bud, we planted this seed that, in the political realm of first century Israel, Jesus is interacting with these four political groups, religious groups as well, asking the sort of question about Rome. What do we do with the fact that our holy land, our land set apart, is being occupied by a foreign power that is desecrating the land by being there? What we want to point out, right, is that Jesus, in choosing disciples from all four groups, blesses some aspects but challenges all of them, and that there's a carryover for all of these attitudes into leaders dealing with groups. So let's go with the Sadducees, right? There's this idea, like you said, the sort of quote-unquote conservative group that's like, don't rock the boat, we'll go along to get along just so we can keep at it. So what happens when we get leaders like this? What's the problem with that?
Well, the problem, I think, is that we live in a world where there's concrete injustice. Well, the danger, if you would put it in a nutshell, is to say, when serious kind of issues, problems, injustices arise, there's a real temptation to kind of iron out those wrinkles. I mean, on a show of this length, it's difficult to dive in real deep. As we've been talking, what stands out to me about Jesus, we can talk about this in relation to the Sadducees, is it's easy to destroy things. You can destroy things very quickly. Mm-hmm. If I told my boys even to destroy the shed in our backyard, they could probably figure that out.
Right.
What's harder is to build up. And what you see with Jesus is that what he's constantly pointing to with these groups is the telos of things, or the end of things. So with the Sadducees, when Jesus enters the temple late in his life, he sees that the religious leaders there have turned it into, he says, a den of robbers, when in fact it was made to be a house of prayer for all peoples. Now, it would have been easy for Jesus to say, look, the destruction of the temple is coming down the pike, and you guys are going to get what you deserve. But he doesn't totally reject temple worship. He points to its true end, and again, lack of time, but the Eucharist is really sort of the fulfillment of that. And that's kind of the leadership vision that we're looking to cultivate.
Yeah, and to sort of round this out, because like you said, we're running out of time. So the opposite sort of impulse that leaders have to deal with is, so if you're not going to be a Sadducee, then are you saying we should be a zealot and to resort to burning it all down? Or should we be like the Essenes and sort of check out? And you see this, right? You have people in your organization, when things seem like they're being compromised because of Sadducee-like leadership, people either check out and they're otherworldly like the Essenes, or they're burn it all down at any cost, any violence is worth. We'll destroy the company, the school, the church in order to make it right. And so then you get this sort of other group that's sort of Pharisee, it's just, if I do things right, if it's about me doing the right thing, everything else will turn out, which Jesus, praises and says it has to start with individuals, but it can't stop with individuals. Mm-hmm. So what's being asked, and that we're lining up for the next show, is this. Then what is holiness about? Why be set apart? And the answer in Jesus is to be set apart for others. And this, my friends, is sacrificial leadership, the root of it, that we set ourselves out for others, to give that others. Even the land of Israel, the people of Israel, the temple, Jesus himself, set apart for the sake of others. And that's what we're going to have to deal with next show. This is the Uncommon Good. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, our families, our city, state, nation, world, galaxy, the whole kit and caboodle, especially with everything going on with Ukraine right now, praying for peace. This is the Uncommon Good, and we'll be back next week. But if people would like to, especially during this Lent, pray with us, what are ways that they can do so?
Yeah, you mentioned the Ukraine and peace around the world. Great intention in line with what the Holy Father has asked for us today. You can pray with us any day on air. We broadcast the Rosary, at 6 a.m. and then later at 10 a.m. We also pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet on air at 2:55 p.m. and the Rosary can be accessed at any time, anywhere on the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Absolutely. We have events at Iowa Catholic Radio and throughout the diocese. You can find them at iowacatholicradio.com. The Eucharistic Miracles of the World display can be viewed at the St. John the Apostle in Norwalk, through March 7th. The next Man Up West Power Lunch, Friday, March 11th at noon at St. Francis of Assisi. Scheduled as a panel of African priests to share their journey to the diocese. And a Lenten lunch will be provided. That's fantastic. You may want to make sure to make that. Steve Ray, Born Again, Faith Alone, What Do I Need to Do to Be Saved? Thursday, April 7th, 6 p.m. at St. Francis of Assisi Parish. And then he will be doing something similar, Defending the Eucharist, Friday, April 8th at 6 p.m. at Holy Spirit Parish in Creston. And then, of course, we have the big July 24th, the Scott Magruder and Ali Colleen at the Iowa Event Center Ballroom. And you can go check that out, celebratecountry.org. And then, of course, we got done with a spring Carathon. We want to thank everyone who donated. We still have donations rolling in. iowacatholicradio.com or call 515-223-1150 to set up your donations. We want to say thank you to everybody who does that. Of course, this is a ministry that is beyond just the people on air, behind the boards, or in the offices. We covet your prayers, your volunteer hours, but of course, materially, we need your donations as well. Thank you for everyone who donated. Thank you for people who are planning to donate. Go to iowacatholicradio.com, or you can do so on the Iowa Catholic Radio app, or call 515-223-1150. Bud, we made it through the 30 minutes. Neither of us passed out.
Hey.
I think we're going to be okay calorie-wise. But really, blessings on this Lent to you and everybody out there listening.
Yeah, thank you to all of you for your support, and please know we'll be praying for you throughout this holy season.
And please, as Bud mentioned, pray for peace in the Ukraine, especially open up your hearts to what you're fasting today for peace. This is The Uncommon Good. God bless everyone. See you next week.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard every week on wonderful Catholic stations like this one, and anytime on podcast. Just search for The Uncommon Good.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and The Uncommon Good provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences. Learn more at mchs.edu.